happy and honored that I can be here and moderate this discussion with our wonderful guests tonight. And I would like to invite on stage Lukas Henning, who is a musician who has been performing with various established as well as upcoming artists, and a curator of Memo, a series of video essays on music and art history. Please welcome him on stage. Our second panelist is Zalmanson, who is a researcher, new media artist, and writer for stage and screen, whose works focus on digital culture and the information society. And he also represents the Print Screen Festival. Lior, please join us on stage. And I would like to also invite Zofia Zembrzuska, who is a cultural manager, the head of Polska Music Program and the Adam Mickiewicz Institute, and a creator of digital project, A Map of Polish Composers. At the beginning, I would like to ask each of the panelists to shortly introduce themselves to the audience and also tell us a bit about what do you do and what is your relationship to the main subject of the discussion. And we will start with Lukas.
Yes, hello. So I'm Lukas Henning. I came here from Freiburg in southern Germany. I studied early music, historical performance practice at Schola Cantorum Basiliensis in Basel, Switzerland. And since about 3 years, I've been a freelance musician, but this is really only part of what I do. What I've been invited here for was more my work with this project that I founded about 2.5 years ago, which is Memo, a series of video essays where I present early music, meaning Renaissance music, Baroque music, and art history in a context, and try to connect it to modern life and open up to bigger topics.
Thank you so much, Lior.
So hi everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me and for organizing. This is the last session, so thank you for the organizer for this wonderful conference. I'm from Tel Aviv. I've been lucky enough to be both an academic, researching online trust and commitment between people and virtual environments. And I'm also a new media artist and the curator of the Print Screen Digital Art Festival. It's Israel's biggest festival for digital art. It's also the only one. So that's how it works. But it's actually on the rise, so there's a lot of new events coming on in 2019 and 2020. And I'm here mostly because I was interested in learning about Polish new media art and design, but also because I'm very curious on the way algorithms affect culture. Both that's what I'm interested in, both academically as an artist. I'm not sure if I should share now the artist project itself, so maybe after the, yeah.
So, Zofia Zembrzuska.
Yeah, very nice to be here. Thank you as well for the invitation. I'm representing actually the organizer institution, so Adam Mickiewicz Institute, where I'm leading the Polska Music Program, which aim is to promote the music of Polish composers abroad. And within that program, I created a map of Polish composers with my team, of course. And it was a huge work, and I would like to refer during our panel to the subject, algorithms and curators, and how it influenced this project and the form of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're gonna definitely talk about that, because our broad subject of our talk is how new cultural ecosystems affects culture and cultural participation, and the role of algorithm in the process. So you've shared, because we were discussing that a bit earlier, and you also shared some of your ideas and your views on the subject, and that's why I would like to go back to you, Zofia, because you also were talking about open versus closed algorithms and how you perceive that and how that affected what you do. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yes, of course. When I wanted to prepare myself for this panel, first of all, I asked myself a question: what the algorithms do with us, and how we can divide them. And in my for the purpose of this panel, and of course this is very subjective, I divided algorithms or systems of proposing us the content nowadays for two types: opening, rather even than opening one, and closing one. So the closing one, we can say it's leading us through a very strict path. Is offering us something that we know that we like. This is like a recognized need, something like it's, so this is a pleasure of getting something that we know we like. And at the same time as this is personal, so we are creating this, as Alek Tarkowski called it, culture bubbles. So we are split between them, and this. Yeah, and what is important in this type of algorithm is that the main idea is consumption of the culture. So getting more and more and maybe spending money on that.
Getting more and more of the same.
Of the same, yeah, or within similar. The same, yes. And the second one is opening algorithm or opening system. Where the path is like an adventure. We don't know whether what we get we would like or not. It's a surprise effect and excitement of getting something new and a real adventure. And having said that, we wanted to, our tool that I will talk several times about, so the map of Polish composers, we wanted to be something opening, to show more that we know already, to open us and our users for something new that they might not expect to like even. And maybe I will just say a few brief words what the project is. So map of Polish composers, or maybe I'll start with the genesis. Like when, why we did invent it. It's March 2013, so the Lutosławski year. Lutosławski is one of the prominent Polish composers, and we had a great celebration year of his music played everywhere. And in the British Telegraph, there was a quote saying, "If Lutosławski still matters, there must be composers around who have been influenced by him. And it's a shame we got no hint of that." And that was the moment we understand that we promote particular composers because we know that they are great and we are like sure that we should promote them. But it is not so easy for people to get the information about other composers, especially when they are from abroad, because we know we have actually the information in the internet about the composers, but about each separate composer, and it's really not so easy to get more of it. So we decided we don't want to create like a new encyclopedia about Polish composers because the content is already in the internet. It's just difficult to get it and to have this journey of like this short and adventurous crash course in Polish music. So that was the main idea, and the map is designed in a way of and form of constellation. So you don't see just using this metaphor. You don't see only the stars which shines the brightest, but you see as well what's around and how the whole constellation is built. So maybe this composer influenced this one, and maybe it's good to see who is connected with whom through the geography, the relation master and pupil, the stylistic used, techniques, etc., etc. So that was the main idea. So you have the user by himself can go and click and see. It's actually a pity that you cannot see it, and I advise you to go to the map and see the map of Polish composers, not on your mobile phone because it's really complex, and you will have the best idea of what the project is once you open it at the computer.
Okay, thank you so much. And you already mentioned the cultural bubbles. that are related to the way algorithms can like influence the way we consume things. And I guess this is also a thing that's interesting for you, Lior. And in our conversations and also conversations with Alek Tarkowski, you've mentioned that in a sense, maybe creators or artists also create for the algorithms, not only for like audiences. And the way we, like as creators, people think about algorithms influence the way they create or the way they produce or promote what they create. Could you please elaborate on that?
Sure. So when you go to Spotify, you notice suddenly music is changing, right? So for instance, musicians use hooks differently, and they start more and more with the choruses. So the business models and the algorithms of platforms change the act of creation itself, right? Musicians want to make money, and they make money by being played on these platforms and being played a lot. And actually, if I remember correctly, Spotify only pays the artist if I think the user has listened to more than like 20 seconds or 10 seconds. So what does it mean for the artist? The artist says, okay, I need to make the song start huge, right? I need to make the song very enticing from the beginning. So no progressive rock style intros that starts very low key and take 2 minutes long. No, that is no longer the case. We needed to make it engaging, right? The word that we all use in the room for different purposes is engagement. But what we mean by engagement is we need to make them stay longer. We need to make them be involved. And it's not just music. You go to Netflix, and you see how movies have changed, right? And that's a different sort of case, because what Netflix is doing is catering to very specific audience. And there's some bright light to it, right? Because suddenly genres like romantic comedy that Hollywood did not produce anymore. Romantic comedies are not big blockbusters. They are not Avengers, right? They are not Marvel comic films. So when it was all about Hollywood, they said, you know, it doesn't make any sense for us financially to bet on a romantic film. But suddenly, when it's Netflix, the genre is now exploding with new films because there's a specific audience who's interested in that and who's interested in not have it as a cinema experience, but rather of a TV experience. And last example for this is think about yourself. When you write status updates in Instagram, in Facebook, when you post a photo to Instagram, how much emphasis do you give to the algorithm? Even if you don't do it, you know, conscientiously, you do think what will make this post popular, how to get likes. And the way to receive likes or loves or followers is not through getting people involved. It's really first about getting the algorithms involved. So for instance, there was a period that everybody said, we need to add a video, right? Because Facebook now is promoting video. And if we'll have video on our status update, more people will see it. Others said, we need to use GIFs. Now they're promoting GIFs. And another person said, we need to use less text or more text, or we need to leave comments for other people. So people are strategizing, trying to decipher the black box, trying to understand the black box that is Facebook algorithm. I'm researching, by the way, Uber algorithm, but it's basically the same. It's not about culture, but it's about making a better business for yourself by understanding the algorithm. So what I'm saying by that is that, you know, there's nothing new about artists want to make a living, artists want to be popular, want to be heard. The thing is that now we cater not only to our niche audience or popular audience, like mass audience, but we also need to cater to different platforms and even different programmers in different platforms, tastes in creating machine learning algorithms, and that's changing culture.
Yeah, and that's what you call the algorithmic audiences, right?
Yeah, that's your algorithmic audiences, and I'm pretty sure that we'll have that more and more in mind when we create our own. Because you know what? Just another sentence on that. Some of the people who read your book, who read your posts, or not just some, the majority of them are not human, right? I don't know if you noticed, but we are like basically in the age of the post-human. We just don't see it because, you know, it's still very much in the invisible part of the web. But there are tons of bots that we know because when we talk about fake news and all these sort of things, there are tons of crawlers on these things that read your posts, that post it again, that share it on like other websites. And a lot of these processes are automatic, are done by algorithms. And there's a great piece by James Bridle that I'm sure some of the people in the audience have read, of YouTube videos created by algorithms for children. So the machine learning algorithms have understood what is interesting to children and what is easily promotable by YouTube Kids. So they created automatic kids videos, and sometimes they go completely off because they are really creepy and weird, but that's what the algorithm has created for the YouTube algorithms to be promoted. And I'm not even sure there's a kid watching them in the end. It's just like being constantly promoted.
Thank you for that remark. And actually, I wanted to ask you now, Lukas, how that influences your work. And you also mentioned in our conversations your notion of like digital court culture. Could you also say something more about that?
Well, as I said, a large part of what I'm working on, thinking about with my Memo project is not just the music taken, you know, as an isolated thing, or the art history taken as an isolated thing. It's always about connecting certain ways culture was produced and received, and just sort of was integrated into the lives of the people back then, and you know, taking it and seeing how that might relate to our modern reality. And so this term of a digital court culture, where suddenly through just technological changes, some living realities of, let's say, 500 years ago of the court life here suddenly becomes relevant to, let's say, kind of our I don't know how many aristocrats are here in the audience, you never know, but to our, let's say, civilian lives, and so the kind of way culture was produced and commissioned and so on. Back then, the courts might suddenly become, in some unexpected ways, relevant again to us today. Oh, much louder this way, yeah. And of course, the videos I'm making, I put them up to YouTube, and I'm every day, I'm also on Instagram and I'm Facebook and so on, and I'm very much confronted with these dynamics, and also somehow have been struggling because I've invested so much time and thought into figuring out how to get myself out there, and there's this general thought that success as somebody who publishes, as a musician, as a kind of who publishes to the public, is really measurable in clicks, in sales numbers and so on. I mean, this is for us a completely normal thought. You know, how much sales, how much clicks means how important you are and how successful you are with your profession. And what's interesting about this court culture, the kind of culture that something like, I don't know, Michelangelo's or Leonardo da Vinci's work comes from, for example, or also Bach's music, or, you know, all these examples, it worked differently. They didn't produce these things for a mass market. It wasn't about counting how many copies of his painting Michelangelo could sell. I mean, there was a whole story of it being then copied and sold without it, but this is a whole different thing. Instead, it was about knowing exactly who you are making this for. There was a court, and you pretty much knew everybody there, and you knew your patron, you knew the person who commissioned this work, and you did it for them, and they had very specific tastes, and they commissioned it for oftentimes very specific things. For example, to communicate something to another court. So it wasn't at all about catering to an algorithm or catering to a demographic, as you have in popular culture and industrial cultural proliferation, where you have a demographic that you cater to. This is sort of, with my background with Memo and early music and all that, this is maybe somehow my response, my immediate response to this kind of shock that I'm not shocked, but this kind of to this sudden realization that we have these algorithms become more and more important, and it's a bit unclear of who am I even making this for? How do I even get myself out there? There's maybe this hope or this thought that maybe I don't have to go down that route. Maybe I can find some way to work as a musician where I can still live comfortably and have a good life and sort of work with interesting people without having to be clicked a million times.
Okay, so we have at least like 2 or 3 important things that already appeared in this discussion. One is that it definitely changes artists' strategies of creating work and working and designing work. And of course, it influences the way we then, as consumers, if we are consumers, we consume, the way we find things and the way we can stick to some things. And I really like this term of algorithmic audience. We kind of have this new phenomena of algorithms that are creating and consuming, in a sense, what is created. But I'm also interested in things that are somehow unexpected and emerge when an algorithm is designed to do one thing, and then we realize it is we can do something unexpected with it. And I wanted to refer to your project, Lior.
Yeah, so I have a project as an artist that I produced this year called Image May Contain. Which discusses, it started with a discussion on accessibility, actually, because in 2017, Facebook has announced that they're basically helping the blind see Facebook. And what they mean by that is that they have add-on that you could add on Facebook, and it reads to you the status updates. But what happens when it encounters a picture? So for that, they have an algorithm called automatic alternative text. And that's basically a machine learning algorithm that is image recognition that tries to understand what's in their picture. And that's common also, I think Microsoft has this type of algorithm, Google has, but Facebook, maybe in 2017, were the only one who said, we're doing it to make basically the blind see Facebook. And I looked at that, PR message, and it looked so, basically very full of hubris. Then I said, I need to investigate this. And what I did is I took photos that Time magazine or Life magazine have decided that they changed the course of history, mostly from the 20th century. And I looked at what the algorithm can see there. So I started with the Vietnamese girl running, it's the Napalm girl, the Vietnamese girl running from the exploded village in the Vietnam War. And actually, even though I can't show you on the screen, you could find it pretty easily because I made it into a very simple link. So if you have online connection or your neighbor does, just go to tiny.cc/Facebook blind, and you will see the object. So to the rest of you, I'll describe it. So Facebook blind. And so I put the photo in the system, and the output was something like 3 people running, people running outside, outdoor, sorry, and I think there was also sky there. So what I did afterwards is just searched for different photos that have the exact same result, that are for the algorithm exactly the same. And I found a picture from East Asia of 3 people running, 3 children running happily in the sun. And I found this photo of a veteran in the US holding his child outside with his wife. And I found various photos that have of course, you don't need a very smart AI to tell you that those photos are very, very different. But for Facebook algorithm for the blind, they basically are the same. So I was wondering, what does the algorithm really understands? I was actually quite shocked because this was 2017, and I'm pretty sure Facebook has better technologies at their hand, but for some reason this is what they used for alternative text. So if you can see it, what I did is basically created lenticular printing, which is like the ads you see here in Warsaw that change when you move. It's all these optic illusions. And I put all these photos together, so when you move in the gallery, you see the different photos, but those photos are all the same. And you're like basically the blind algorithm. And I really worry that if that's the level that a big company like Facebook has to understand cultural photos of great importance, then we either have a lot to worry about or not at all worrying about, because we are very, very far from strong AI and AI that really can replace humans. But in the meanwhile, it's important to say that these algorithms are not just used as alternative text to help the blind understand, but they are already being used for Facebook in order to sort photos, to understand connection, basically to curate. So I think the way Facebook curates content is very limited and currently does not have any almost cultural sensibilities. That's why they really need, to this day, and that's why we hear all about content moderation, because there are real people still, and like by thousands, there are thousands of people whose job is to go through these photos and really try to understand them, and especially in cases where they are too violent or too sexual and they need to be removed. But we currently still need the human eye, and if we do this exercise of algorithmic cultural understanding, we get this ridiculous results.
Actually, I think what you're describing here relates a lot to the very notion of like cultural canon. So because you were talking about iconic pictures that are super important for the history and culture of our societies, and also about like sensitive or like culturally sensitive curation that is missing in that. And that's why I want to ask, and I will turn to you, Zofia, as a first one. So how you see the role of institutions in all that? And you are representing an institution, and this is an institutional project. So I wonder how you perceive the role of institutions in all that, and because traditionally they were the ones who were responsible for curating the canon or like creating and supporting the canon. So how do you see that now?
Yes, of course. As a worker of the public institution, I think, and a cultural institution, this is a very good question to me. And actually, working on a map of Polish composer was answering that question: how we can curate at the same time giving an it's like a combination of this free choice, so this, let's say, opening algorithm, and something curated, because all the materials, and this is not just texts but video materials, excerpts of music, trivia, so people don't know only the full biography, but everything about like this small things, interesting things from his life or her life, which makes him interesting. So all this is not made by an algorithm, so it's not deprived from these nuances and everything which people who are really into it, they know. So we, of course, engaged several musicologists who invented all this network of Polish composers and how to present it. So our way of coping with algorithms was to, especially in my field, I'm talking only about my field of music, of course, now. But I wanted to do something that's in between. So is very easy for people to be used. So they by clicking and seeing next constellation of this composer and then another one, they can make. So this is very fast and very easy to get the content, and it's you have the impression that it's built in a second, just especially for you. But at the same time is very well prepared and really it's deepening what you can know. So I think this is a perfect example of how we can cope with this struggle between algorithms and archives which might be not used, and how to make them alive, and how to propose people interesting content. And actually with the map, because we have several filters, so you can, as said at the beginning, you can choose by geography or by stylistic or etc. etc. You can see a composer in different perspectives, and you can actually make your own curation at Polish Music. Yeah, you can choose a subject that you like. You can choose I don't know, a term. Maybe you don't know what that means, so first you can check it. Then you can look which composers compose within the stylistic. You can listen for some pieces, and then you can see which path you made. So it's like your exposition, yeah, of Polish composers, your journey. So that's something something which I find very good way of engaging people and presenting the material that public institutions produce. Just one more thing around that is that by creating map, as said as well at the beginning, we know that there is we are attacked even with the content in the internet. So it's not difficult to. We know that there is information, so it's only difficult to how to get it, and it's we didn't want to rewrite again the things that are already done. So the map can be seen as like a door to the materials which is already online, because we not only published what we produced, what we created and wrote and get from the archives, but as well we share a lot of links, so you can see the materials which were already done, like for example 3composers.pl, a very one of the best actually websites about Polish composers, Górecki, Penderecki and Lutosławski, and it's like huge work of playlist of people showing their ideas about them. But if you don't know this website, how you can get to it? So we use the opportunity to, like in the profile of every composer, you have a list of links where you can find like a beautifully made material. So we not only show what we produce, but we share the links and the references, so people can make the exploration by themselves.
So if I understand you correctly, you think that institutions should be aware of like how these things works, and then either like create counter strategies or create different platforms where we can like experience things differently in a like opening way, as you mentioned before.
I think yes, because nowadays we know that we don't spend a lot of time on research if we are not researchers, because we live very fast. And I think making the access to culture easier is one of the biggest challenges that cultural institutions are coping now, I think. And map of Polish composer, I find, is one of the way, one step further. And I think this is something, of course, we can have lots of different projects having the same idea and even better, and making it, it's just one drop in this ocean of making the culture more accessible, let's say.
Okay, and I guess institutions might be one answer, but I wonder maybe there are other instances, like a patron or somebody who can be an answer to that. And I wonder how you see that as an artist, and how the role of what other roles than institution can perform this protective or produce different strategies to be more useful for artists who are trying to escape these dangers.
Oof. Well, on that topic of institutions, canon, it has actually has had a huge influence on how musicology and historical musicology has developed since its inception, actually. And it's probably good to know in this context that there is actually a big imbalance and bias in the kind of picture we have of musical history today for this reason. The thing is that musicology is a relatively new discipline, has only really been about for the last 100 years or so. And I guess it's a natural thing, or it was at least a very natural thing, that, for example, when you were a German in the year 1900 or 1910, well, the logical thing was usually to go and look for Bach and German music history. And if you were an Italian, you looked for Italian music history. And if you were Portuguese, you looked for Portuguese music history. And if you were English, you looked for English music history. And you already notice the whole situation in the country, the academic situation in terms of funds and special interests and so on, was very different in Germany 100 years ago than it was, let's say, in Spain. And so, you know, and this affects us today in the way that, you know, when you ask just somebody who is not a very specific musicologist, well, what was music like in Spain during Bach's time? Because here in Germany, Bach was making this amazing music. Can you name one Spanish composer who worked in Spain around the time of Bach? What was he doing? And then usually people will answer, well, I don't know, was there music in Spain during that time? No. And of course there was. And if you go on Wikipedia, you quickly find it, but this is already only the tip of the iceberg. It completely, our inner topology of musical history is completely shifted like that. It seems like in the 17th, 18th, 19th century, basically all great music came kind of from Germany, Italy, and from France, and from England, and in Spain there was basically nothing somehow, and Poland, yeah, well, 1-2 people maybe, but of course if you actually go and dig a little bit, you notice this is complete nonsense. I mean, not what it means complete nonsense, but there's so much rich musical history that just the German musicologist chose to dig and look for Schütz or for and not to go to some monastery here in Poland maybe and look for a Polish Baroque composer who worked around the same time and was maybe highly respected and actually a great master of his art. So you know this also has something to do with the canon, and in that way, of course, I mean these institutions are absolutely vital to this kind of work, obviously. But there's a kind of bias in a way, in that way, of course. I mean, if an institution is financed by, if the German state finances a musicological institute somewhere in Freiburg, why should they spend hundreds of thousands, millions and millions for them to go to Portugal? You know. I mean, and of course they don't really usually in general. And if you well, this may be all I really want to say. I don't have on this particular topic.
Can I continue from here?
Sure, go.
I think what happened in the last 4 to 5 decades, and it's not just specifically, of course, not just musicology, but almost in every topic that we discuss, is that a lot of sciences, mostly I'm a social scientist, I'm not into the arts as an academic, discovered that the human is biased, right? Its decision processes is biased. So the canon is biased. It's constructed in a way that could be racist. It could have been, unegalitarian. It wasn't democratized. Of course, it wasn't, right? And that's one thing. And the second thing is, we have all these behavioral economics. And they said, listen, we thought humans are rational beings, but they're not. Even for us, we're making decisions that are not optimal. So if we're biased creatures, and if we're non-rational in many cases, maybe the algorithm should decide for us. Maybe there's such a thing as a better, more objective decision process. So I think in many fields, and culture is just one of them, we are now moving to trust much more the algorithm than our own thinking. And I think, actually, I'm not a pessimist when it comes to technology. I like technology very much. For many decision processes, this has created amazing things. We call it sometimes, I teach the movie Moneyball that you've probably seen. So there's a Moneyball effect, right? You've seen this film about the baseball team with Brad Pitt, that when he started using decision based on data science, then suddenly he could take a team that was very, very unsuccessful and made it almost to the top. So the idea that algorithm can help you, but now in the last 2 years, and I think this panel also represents this idea as well, we are saying to ourselves, wait a second, but algorithms are also socially constructed. Algorithms are also biased, and algorithms do not understand everything. So I think the future, or at least the future of the next decade or two, since again, we're not close to strong AI, and I think one of the biggest challenges is for algorithms to understand culture. So I think the question that scientists are now grappling with, and also curators, is the combination of algorithms and people. How should, and educators, of course, how should algorithms work with people? And I think the systems that are the most interesting things that we'll see in the next, well, we see now, but we'll see in the next decade or so, are systems that are trying to understand a robot-human companionship in decision-making, an algorithm-human combination. Because we each have our flaws, but when we bring them together, we might eliminate the canon. It will be way more easy to identify these subculture of music that was untreated because, I don't know, musicology professors were snobs and they thought everything is happening in Germany or something like that. But then again, it would not make the silly mistakes of, I don't know, getting into this weird feedback loops that algorithms can have and just giving you more of the same. Because sometimes you need the human critic, you need the human curator to find something that is rare and unique, and people don't seem to care about or love, and that person, and it's usually, that's what we say about, have you seen this, the ending of the film, and it's not a spoiler, but there's a film by Pixar, Ratatouille, right? About the mouse. I don't see your faces, so I don't know if you're responding to this. Yes. So there's a food critic, and he says it's a beautiful speech, and I recommend you seeing it again. That says the critic role, because he's like the villain in the film, but really his job is to find that something that people are not aware of, that people do not pay attention to, and put a spotlight on that. And algorithms currently, they don't have this capacity. They're not built in a way to spotlight the obscure, the unknown, and to find the true genius in that. And we still need humans for that. So I think the future is, at least the near future, is in the mix.
Can I say just one comparison that aroused when you said that? And again, sorry to the Map of Polish composers, that with algorithms, we have, like, you can imagine a walk in the industrial fields of strawberries where the path is straight, and you will collect, your harvest will be very good and beautiful with, red, beautiful and very tasty strawberries. And outside of the algorithm, you have, like in comparison to let's say, map of Polish composers, you're in the woods and with a pocket mushroom guide in your pocket, and you don't know what the harvest will end with. But you might find very good mushrooms, you might find some that you cannot eat, but it's beautiful. And you might find, you don't know the number, you don't know the quality you will find, but it's just the journey and the adventure of finding something. That's as well the world of curating and leading people to see something new and unexpected.
Yeah, and I also think this is like maybe an answer to a challenge that maybe with mass digitization of cultural content and heritage content, we kind of has this like the risk of like the database that nobody looks at. So the massive amount of images and cultural content that people sometimes just don't get to, and there are things that are amazing and obscure and weird and awkward maybe and super interesting, but they were never in the canon, so they are somehow forgotten. And maybe things that you are describing might be an answer to that, so that we can shift the way we perceive history and culture through that, and also like the biases related to that. And I also, as I am the person who has the mic, I can also share it with you. So I wanted to ask if there are any questions in the audience. If somebody has a question, please raise your hand. Or comments. No.
It's always scary to be the first one.
Don't be afraid.
So if not, I'll have another comment.
Go ahead.
I haven't prepared it ahead, but I want to connect to something you said in the beginning. And you said about open experience, open algorithms and closed algorithms. And you surprised me because I thought when you said open, I thought you were going to say algorithms which we can control, which we can, I don't know, we can see what's going on inside. But you meant algorithms that surprise you, that don't give you more of the same. And I think we also see a shift in the internet because there was a period where it was really participatory, right? The open source movement, Wikipedia, like let's say 15 years ago, even a decade ago, that was one way to go, to give people more opportunities to be involved and to participate. And I was also, when I wrote my PhD, that's also what I was very much interested in. But the sad reality sometimes is that people do not want to be involved. They do sometimes just want to sit back, relax, and let Spotify
You're criticizing
play.
our audience now.
What? No, it's not. Well,
This was clever.
I didn't think about the meta level in all of this, actually.
Very meta.
It was, but it's true. You know, we haven't discussed, this is not a panel about interactive films, right? But some of you are involved in interactive films, and everybody who's done interactive films know that it's really hard to make them work because people sometimes want to go into a cinema and just lean back. They don't want to be like this. They have the game mode and they have the film mode. And it doesn't mean that there's no great examples for interactive cinema. And my festival shows great interactive films. But it's a constant battle because sometimes, in many cases, we do want algorithms to save our time, to show us less things. We want less choice. There's a great TED Talk, like an old one, called The Paradox of Choice. Sometimes we do appreciate less choice. We think we want more choice. We think we want to be involved, but really we want the algorithm to decide because we just don't know. So I was interested in that in respect to the fact that we sit here and criticize, you know, algorithms and how maybe they should be more open and we should see what's going inside their backwards. But I have to admit, it's also a very academic sort of discussion. It's a very ethical discussion. But in reality, and I think a lot of these companies have seen in their A/B testing that in many cases, the regular audience does not want to know. They just want to be entertained. So if you get them to get them to entertain more, then that's your metric, that's the thing you optimize for, and it just works. On a ethical level and talking about values, yes, we want it to be open. But I think for people doing practical things, that's a question because it sometimes works against the experience. to have it too much participatory or too much co-designed by the user.
Yeah, and I also, but I think in this case, there's also a question of like transparency, probably, and the role of like, so if we know how the algorithm works, we maybe somehow can relate to that in different ways, and then I think the black box is.
Will you read the explanation about how the algorithm works? Does anybody read rules and regulations? You have, you know, what Google is doing to you, you have it written down, but it's like it's in a document that nobody will ever read, right? So that's my worry. I think academically, in terms of society, yes, I want algorithms to be explained, I want them to be checked by third parties, but in reality, probably 99.9% of us will just click next and will, you know, be part of it.
And be happy with another black shirt, for example.
Yeah, in a way.
So I'm going to check again if there are any questions in the audience or comments. Yeah, sometimes people do not want to participate, and they have the right to do that. So if not, I guess if you have any questions or comments, you can also approach all the panelists after we get off stage. And now I'm going to thank you for that discussion. Thank you so much. And thank you.